welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to have a look at tackling open-ended questions. There are two open-ended questions in your exam. You'll be able to recognise them by the term using your knowledge of chemistry. Each of the questions is worth 3 marks. There's no one expected answer. It is a chance for you to show off what you know and understand about the topic as a whole. The mark scheme that you'll find if you're looking at past papers will have this written in it. So 1 mark for limited understanding. This means that you've made some statements that are relevant, showing some of the chemistry is understood. 2 marks means a reasonable understanding, so your relevant statements show that the context of the question is understood. And 3 marks is a good understanding. You've given a logically correct answer to the question itself, but it doesn't need to be excellent and it doesn't need to be complete. Some tips to help you answer these. First, try and identify the unit and the topic that the question is related to. This will help you narrow down what information to include. The question itself is about chemistry, so try to include diagrams, maybe of experiments or structures, formulae and equations, structures and calculations. You can even put in example calculations. You can write in sentences and paragraphs, or you can write in bullet points. And you can go into detail about one topic, or you could go into less detail about lots of topics. To get the 3 marks, you actually have to answer the question itself, not just write everything that you know about the topic. The question is worth 3 marks. This means it shouldn't take you longer than 5 minutes. If you do find yourself struggling, then I would recommend that you move on and come back to it if you've got time at the end. Let's have a look at an example. Atoms of different elements have different attractions for bonding electrons. Electronegativity is a measure of the attraction an atom involved in a bond has for the electrons in a bond. Using your knowledge of chemistry, discuss the importance of electronegativity in bonding structure and properties of compounds. So this question, although open-ended, does give you a structure to follow. It wants you to look at bonding structure and properties of compounds and relate it all back to electronegativity. So let's look at the different bonding that we could find in compounds. So the first that we have is ionic. Then we have covalent network. And then covalent molecular. So for ionic, we have a large difference in electronegativity. This leads to ions forming. In covalent networks, there is likely to be a small difference in electronegativity when it's a compound. And for covalent molecular, we have 2 options. So we can have a non-polar molecule or a polar molecule. So for a polar molecule, it's either going to be no difference in electronegativity or a difference but it's symmetrical. For polar, it's where we're going to have a difference and it's asymmetrical. So let's look back at ionic. So for ionic compounds, their structure is a lattice of oppositely charged ions. And this has a big impact on its properties. It means that they have high melting points, they tend to be soluble in water, and they only conduct when they are liquid or aqueous, where the ions are free to move. For a covalent network, you're going to have a large network of covalent bonds. And this leads to a high melting point. These do not conduct. And they're also insoluble. For covalent molecular, the non-polar covalent molecular compounds will only have London dispersion forces between their molecules. So this means that they tend to have low melting points, will be insoluble, and they do not conduct. Whereas for the polar compounds, they will either have permanent dipole, or hydrogen bonding between their molecules, which means that they have a slightly higher melting point. They're more likely to be soluble, but they still would not conduct. Pause the video now and try this question. A teacher told a class that collisions were key to chemical reactions. Using your knowledge of chemistry, discuss this statement. So here we're really looking at collision theory and rates of reaction. So we can look at all the different ways that we can impact the collisions and change them so we can change the rate of reaction. So if you were to increase temperature, then you're going to increase collision frequency. So you're more likely to have successful collisions. So your rate would go up. If you were to increase the surface area by making the particles smaller, again, you're going to increase your collision frequency and increase your rate. If you were to increase your concentration, you're going to increase your collision frequency and the rate. Same if we do pressure for gases. And if you were to add a catalyst, this can help to lower the activation energy, leading to more successful collisions. Leading to a faster rate. We can also look at collision geometry. So it needs to be correct for the reaction to take place. You could also mention things like if we have our little energy thing here, that at the top you would have your activated complex. Okay, and that only happens after successful collisions. Pause the video now and try this question. Cow's milk is mostly made up of water with small amounts of fats and oils, proteins, sugars, and other compounds. Milk is white because it contains droplets of fats and oils that are dispersed in the water. It also contains small droplets of proteins. The fats in the milk depend on what the cow eats. In summer, the fats obtained from the milk have a higher melting point than those obtained from winter milk. Milk goes off because of reactions involving the hydroxyl groups on the sugar molecules in milk. Using your knowledge of chemistry, discuss the chemistry of cow's milk. So there's quite a lot going on in this question. So we have fats and oils, and it talks about them being dispersed in water, so we can look at that. We have droplets of proteins, so we can talk about structure of proteins. We have the fats in milk depend on what the cow eats. So the summer fats have higher melting points and the winter fats have lower. And then milk goes off because of reactions involving the hydroxyl groups and the sugar molecules. So we can look at each of these in turn. Let's first look at fats and oils. The first thing they mention are the droplets dispersed in water. So this is an emulsion. So you could define emulsion, you could draw a diagram of an emulsion, and you could mention the need for emulsifiers for them to stay within suspended. Later on, it mentions that the summer fats have higher melting points than those obtained from winter. So higher melting points means that they're going to be more saturated. So they'll have a straighter structure and they'll have stronger LDFs. Okay, lower melting points would be the opposite. We've got a mention of proteins. So you could show what an amide link looks like, the elements involved. And then we also have a mention of milk going off because of reactions involving the hydroxyl groups. So this would be where the hydroxyl group, so if we just represent the rest of the sugar as R, so we've got OH, is reacting with oxygen and it's going to create a carboxylic acid. So that's what's happening when it goes off. There's lots of scope here for you to be able to draw some diagrams of what the fats and oils might look like. So for example, you can have like the tuning fork shape. You can show if they are more saturated or unsaturated, how this impacts the packing. You can show droplets being suspended in an emulsion and show how an emulsifier might work. You can show what an amide link would look like within a protein. Lots of things that you can include within this one. Pause the video now and try this question. Alcohols, aldehydes and ketones can be distinguished using chemical tests. Using your knowledge of chemistry, describe the experimental procedures, including the expected results, that could be used to distinguish between alcohols, aldehydes and ketones. Any suitable chemicals and apparatus can be used. So again, this, although an open question, does lead you down a certain path looking at oxidizing agents. So we've got a few that we can use to distinguish between aldehydes and ketones, so we can start there. So the first one that we're going to look at would be toluenes, and this would go from colorless to silver mirror. Okay, and it would do that for an aldehyde, but not for a ketone. We've then got phalings, which goes from blue to orange, and again that would be for an aldehyde, but not a ketone. And then we also have acidified dichromate, which goes from orange to green for aldehydes. So alcohols can also be distinguished using hot copper oxide. Okay, and this will go from black to brown. The way that we could carry these out, so for the first three, it would be a case of putting the solution into a test tube and then putting that into a hot water bath. For heating it over hot copper oxide, you can just add the copper oxide in, or you can pass it over. If we have a boiling tube on its side, you can have some cotton wool which is soaked in your alcohol, and then have your copper oxide here, and then you can just heat it up. Thank you for watching my video. I hope that you found it helpful. Please remember to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified of new videos. You can also follow me on Instagram, Miss Adams Chemistry, and TikTok, Miss Adams Chem, for flashcards and short videos. Bye for now.